Welcome to the Adventure Mechanics side quest, and today it's just me, Chandler. When I first started getting serious about game development, I created a blog as a way to write down my musings and spread my interest in game design principles with people. Looking back at it, one of the first posts I made was about motivation and completing a solo project. At this point, I was mostly working on game jam games. I feel like I need to readdress this issue, especially in light of how much time it's taking me to get Cartogrator into something resembling my original vision for the game. So in this episode of the Adventure Mechanics side quest, I'll be doing a little bit of navel gazing and comparing what I thought I needed for motivation when I started and what I think I need now and see how they compare to each other. In my second real blog post, I focused on the three things that I thought were hindering me from completing a game. Lacking the rush of a game jam, the quick burst of the game jams versus the slow burn of actually finishing a game, and the issues of being a solo developer. When I first wrote that blog post, linked to it in the show notes, I had done about 6 months worth of game jam games. This equated to about 6 or 7 games, all in various states of having a complete core gameplay loop. That means they're all incredibly rough and barely have anything beyond what the loop was implemented as. But, as these are all technical games, I felt that I was doing very well in terms of being a developer. At the time, I was working on a number of small prototypes, none of which were worthy, I guess, to develop further. Despite that, I felt I could finish a game and publish it in a relatively short period of time. I mean, I got 6 games out in 6 months, why couldn't I polish one of my prototypes for completion? Now that I'm almost a year into developing Cartogrator and don't have anything beyond that prototype to show for it, I see that getting a prototype and finishing the game are two very, very different things. To be honest, the rush of game jams is hugely addictive and overestimates your ability to actually build a game. All of the patchwork and papering over that has to happen in a jam are the sort of decisions that are much harder to make when you're working on your own game. All of the shortcuts that you make to get the game done in that time frame just don't quite work when you're developing the game yourself. You end up having to go back and rework those quote unquote patches over and over again to make your vision a reality. I have obviously done this on Cartogrator already when I had to redesign the states of the game itself. You have to focus a lot more on polishing than you normally would in a game jam. And I think I was off on the wrong foot when I started thinking I was a true game developer because I made 6, or well, I think 16 at this point, games for game jams. In short, I was able to beat the spread, metaphorically speaking, and actually set myself up for failure. I kind of foretold that with the second point that I put into the second blog post. I instinctively knew that I wasn't going to be as simple as a game jam to get the game out, but I underestimated the amount of effort that goes into actually completing a game. And maybe it's just me being locked away for so long talking, but I underestimated how much work would go into fighting myself. Doing things that I don't want to do or haven't come up with a good answer for yet is especially difficult for me. Sometimes I end up just staring at my code, not knowing what to work on, or, worse yet, actively avoiding the things that I need to get done to make the next milestone. I find myself doing this more and more as I get into the more complicated details for Cartogrator. I'll be honest, there have been more than a few 0% weeks, and if you're not familiar with what a 0% week or 0% day is, it's the concept of not getting anything done on your game or project over a given period of time. As this is quickly becoming too introspective, I'll leave that for a little bit later. Difficulties I've run into with Cartogrator actually ties nicely in with the last bullet point of that post. In the third bullet point, I talked about being a solo dev and relying on myself to get things done. To that end, I am still crappy at this. Accountability is a thing, and I am terrible at it. If I haven't mentioned it before, I run a game developer forum every weekend. As for what we actually do in the forum, we go over some game theory, or whatever is very interesting or topical at the time, and then go over what we've done over the last week or however long it's been since the last forum you've attended, and then we finish up with looking at our game in a specific light or lens. In this context, it's a game design lens. If you're interested, I'll put a link to the book we use and the lenses themselves in the show notes as well. This has been my primary form of accountability over the last 6 years. And although it's been a hell of a lot of fun, I can't say it actually has helped me get a game out the door. I find myself putting more and more effort into the forum some weeks than I do into the games that I'm trying to make. This is becoming increasingly problematic, especially considering it's my accountability and it takes my limited weekly time that I have to work on Cartogrator and forces it into working on something else. And that actually brings up an interesting point. I can see why some people want to quit their day job to focus on their game, gambling on the fact that it's going to be successful enough to support them moving forward. Unfortunately, I don't really have the faith in my own game design skills, nor do I have the desire to risk my livelihood on a bet like that. I mean, I'm terrible at publicizing myself, and let's be perfectly honest, I'm a developer, not a marketer. So, where does this leave me? Well, since we've been having a bit of a hiatus on the mainline adventure mechanics episodes, it's given me an opportunity to use these side quests as another form of accountability as well. That's why I'm taking a look at my seemingly perennial weak point of self-motivation for my own games. If the last year and a half has proven anything, it's that left to my own devices and without having to do external commitments, I can actually get a lot done. I think the key is, though, that I have to be able to say no and I need to focus on X today. Despite being an introvert, I do thoroughly enjoy spending time with people face to face. It is obvious to me, though, that I need to focus at least one day a week on my game design itself and developing Cartogrator. Talking about game design and researching is great and all, but if I'm ostensibly a game developer, I still need to sit down and actually design and develop games. And I think I haven't given myself enough time over the last few months to do so. We'll see if a dedicated amount of time will help in terms of actually getting the game done. So, have I changed much as a developer over the last 6 years? Not really. I still thoroughly enjoy the rush of game jams, especially when working in a team to get something done. And I still need to internalize that making games for a jam does not equate to making a commercial game for release. If anything, doing game jams can put you into bad habits where you think that you're actually further along than you really are. I really need to get the last few features into Cartogrator and start polishing so I can call out for some more in-depth playtesting. I feel like there's a good nugget in what I have already, and if anything, having people look at it and give feedback will motivate me to get more done. Accountability is going to be a continuing issue, especially since this is my hobby and I don't really have the push to get it out that I would have if it was my job. I'm partially okay with that, however, since I just want to release the game for people to enjoy, and I don't really expect to make much, if anything, off of it. One of the curses of making your hobby your job is that it's no longer fun. At least, so I hear. I don't really want to ruin game design and development for myself by pushing that so hard that I burn myself out. That's not to say that I don't want to have my work appreciated, it's just more that I don't want to jade myself on game design or development. Where is Cartogrator right now? Well, I'm actually in the middle of putting NPCs into the game. This is a non-trivial task, especially given the amount of rework that I've had to do in the last couple months, but I still need to get it done since it is one of the core tenets of Cartogrator, or should I say one of the core pillars of Cartogrator, rather. I attempted to put a day-night cycle into Cartogrator, but ran into a fundamental limitation of Pygame where if I modify too many surfaces at once, it severely degrades performance. This is fundamentally due to the fact that Pygame is limited to the CPU in order to do all of its operations and can't really leverage the GPU as much. I may end up having to cut the day-night cycle entirely from the game at this point. Either that or I'll have to radically change what the day-night cycle looks like in the game itself. I don't know, I'll have to keep exploring it to see what I come up with. This has been one of the issues I haven't really wanted to address, obviously. It sucks having to run into these hard limitations and trying to find a workaround. We'll see if I come up with anything to work around this hard limitation of Pygame to include the day-night cycle into the Cartogrator. I really want to include it because I think it will add a lot of variety and flavor to the game itself. And that's about all that I have for this episode of the Adventure Mechanics Side Quest. As always, if you have any suggestions, comments, or questions, reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is @JCSuron. This has been the Adventure Mechanics Side Quest, and I'll talk to you next time.